I cannot take my female athlete and make them not female. So no matter what you're looking at, whether you're going to say shallow intercondylar notch, whether you're going to say Q angle, people getting into the hormonal thing, how are you gonna control the hormonal thing with a team of 30 girls? There are all these things that you look at and think, I understand that we want to study female athletes. I understand that we want to pay attention to female athletes, but we can't make our female athletes any less female. Although, well, we could get into another whole topic in terms of that, but I'll leave that one alone.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the Strong Female Athlete Podcast. Just want to give a quick shout out to our official sponsor, Simply Faster, a company dedicated to better tools and better technology for athlete development. If you're serious about gaining speed and power, I highly recommend you check out their amazing products and technology that's really taking athletes and coaches to the next level. So be sure to check them out, and let's get into today's guest. Mike Boyle, welcome to the Strong Female Athlete Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be on again.
Yeah, I think you've been on one or two times before, and I can't remember the exact topics, but definitely something with soccer, conditioning, mile-long runs, fitness tests, just, the usual nonsense in the soccer community.
It's funny that I think most of the time for you and me, it's in response to a tweet about somebody doing something dumb. So
Yeah. Yeah, and recently we just wrapped up soccer preseason. We are now in September, and just the stories I hear on preseason three-a-days, fitness tests before 11v11 scrimmages, I'm just like, well, I predicted this. It's the same every year, but just starting to be a little more vocal about it, and I think you are too, which is good.
yes, I've realized that you have to be because I think, well, I know the education now is social media and it is podcasts. And so if you're not kind of out there shouting a little bit, you'll get ignored. And I think you have to be vocal. You have to get in and say, this is wrong and this is why it's wrong because it it's not, I think it is getting better. I'm not going to say it's not getting better, but I don't think it's getting better fast enough in general.
I can agree. I think it is getting a little bit better. And I think there are a lot of coaches out there who are open to feedback. Have you gotten people reaching out to you after some of your tweets about this that they've changed their ways?
Yes, I have actually. But again, I don't, it's not like we're getting flooded with that. But yes, there are definitely people who are starting to realize that realistically, the thing that I'm trying to do and now we're more in the conditioning topic again, but it's just trying to get people to understand that practice is overwhelming in and of itself for a kid. No matter how hard you've been working out in the preseason, practice is overwhelming. When you go to 5 days a week of practice, and even if you were going an hour, I mean, I'm looking at people and thinking, hey, you should probably really be ramping up just your practice volume, never mind fitness testing in terms of trying to figure out who's in shape because one at that point in time, and I'm a believer, I still think you should fitness test. I do believe that. I want to know who worked and who didn't work. I want to know who followed the program, who didn't follow the program. But some of the fitness testing just gets stupid and redundant, and some of it is I'm going to try to outdo somebody else's fitness test. We'll do more fitness and a harder test, and if they're doing three, we'll do six, kind of thing. So it just gets dumb and dumber. But we wanted to talk about ACLs. We could talk about conditioning over again if we really want to.
Yeah, well, it kind of leads into ACL. So I got probably the craziest DM in all the years I've been doing this. I had a mom of a college soccer girl say that there were two ACLs in preseason. I'm not going to say the team, but then she told me what the preseason looked like, and I was like, oh, I'm not really surprised. So I think a lot of people aren't really paying attention that a lot of this is a load problem, but then there's other people that are like, it's a female problem. And that's why I wanted to bring you on to speak to that. Why should we stop focusing on this whole like female, like Q angle anatomy factor?
Because I can't make you any less female. No matter if I said whatever I said, you're going to be more predisposed and I'm going to be predisposed. There's nothing I can do about that. I cannot take my female athlete and make them not female. So no matter what you're looking at, whether you're going to say shallow intercondylar notch, whether you're going to say Q angle, whatever those things that you may say about, and even people getting into the hormonal thing, I understand. Great. How are you gonna control the hormonal thing with a team of 30 girls? There are all these things that you look at and think, I understand that we want to study female athletes. I understand that we want to pay attention to female athletes, but we can't make our female athletes any less female. Although, well, we could get into another whole topic in terms of that, but I'll leave that one alone. But in general, female athletes are female, will remain female, which means any predisposition that they have is just something that you have to accept. And then you have to say, what's the next layer? And the next layer, you and I know the next layer. The next layer is strength. And that's where we're failing miserably with our young females in terms of strength and stability and landing skills and all of these things that we're not addressing with our female athletes. But we still want to moan and groan about the fact that, oh, we're getting hurt 8 times more, 6 times more, whatever the rate is, more than males. And my thing is, okay, let's be proactive about it. Let's do something about that, as opposed to consistently complaining that, well, we have this problem because we're female. It's kind of like, I get it. I understand that part. But there's nothing we can do about that. We cannot change that factor. I did an ACL presentation one time, and I actually used the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer about how, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's really what you've got to look at when you're talking about ACLs, or when you talk about anything from a training standpoint. You've got to be able to change the things that you can change, and then know what things are not changeable. In this situation, strength, landing skills, there are all these things that are changeable. Gender, not one of them. So why focus on something that you can't do anything about? And people keep doing it. They keep studying and they keep throwing more data up there, which I think just muddies the waters. It probably makes young females nervous, makes them more apprehensive about training, makes them more apprehensive about playing, but that doesn't really do anything, I don't think, proactively to move the needle.
Yeah, and it's like that we already have barriers of girls not getting in the gym enough. And it's like, why are we going to complicate this more? Like adding the menstrual cycle layer, for example. Okay, like maybe they tear their ACLs during a certain phase, but there's not really much quality research to back that. So it's like, are we even helping them at this point? Or should we just teach them, like you said, deceleration, how to do a single leg squat well? It's just controllable versus uncontrollable.
Hey guys, just want to take a quick moment to shout out our sponsor, Simply Faster, and one of my favorite speed timing systems from them, the Free Lap. I use it for my own sprint training as well as for my athletes, and they love it. It's super easy to set up, you can take it to the field on your own, and you can get accurate speed times to track your progress. Check the Free Lap link in the caption below to start adding timing into your speed sessions. If you know me, you know I love my Free Lap. If you're serious about speed, it's time to start timing.
We can cliche this thing to death in terms of controlling the controllables. There are all these cliches that are all really applicable in this particular situation. And the biggest thing I always, and part of the problem too, and I think we might have talked about this, but there's a really good book called Good for a Girl
Yeah.
that I really like. And it was written by a female distance runner. And she started getting into anatomy and started talking about the crazy stat, and I forget the actual number, but there's a huge number of girls that stop playing sports because of sports bra fitting. Like, think about that. And so we started talking about sports bras on our website, and my daughter immediately texted me. So I have a daughter who's 26 who played college hockey, and she's like, "Dad, you're such a creep. What are you doing?" And I said, "No, this is the problem, Michaela. The problem is that people don't want to talk about obvious stuff like how to buy a good sports bra." And so you get into, because what happens with females, this is my thesis, and I believe this to be 100% true. Female maturation involves a gain of non-propulsive mass. Females, when their body changes at puberty, their hips get wider and they develop breasts. That does not athletically help you at all. Whereas a young male is going through the exact opposite problem in terms of a young male is getting more muscular. He's gaining size, he's gaining strength, he's getting lots of positives through the puberty process. The female is literally trying to survive this body change that is not at all conducive in general to making them a better athlete. And then you think about that and you take a young female who maybe in the course of a 1 year time period goes through a really significant body change. That significant body change really changes what you're doing from a decelerative standpoint, really changes what you're doing. And so you're getting heavier. You can't control that, generally speaking. And you're not getting stronger. So you start looking at, like, I look at it and think, my God, strength training for females through puberty is absolutely positively essential because they're already at a disadvantage based on what's going to occur with their body. But even I always use the term non-propulsive mass because I was trying to find, okay, what's a nice way to say this that's not going to get people all up in arms? But they are gaining non-propulsive mass. The male is gaining propulsive mass. And when you look, that's really where the lines diverge, right? When you think about that U12 time, you don't see a lot of ACL tears in young prepubescent females. You see that number go through the roof immediately post puberty because you get somebody who they got kind of a bigger chassis and they didn't get any upgrade in the brakes. And you think, okay, that's going to be a problem because this person probably maybe wasn't a great decelerator to begin with, but now we've really changed kind of the composition of the system and the brakes are still the same. And that to me is literally, not to try to make it a play on words, but that's where it breaks down, where suddenly you think, okay, I've got this young girl who is now heavier, her body shape has changed, and I haven't upgraded the braking system. And ACL tears are a failure of the braking system. No one tears an ACL in acceleration, right? I mean, we know how it happens. It's a plant. It's a decelerative step. It's a direction change step that causes that injury to happen. And that to me is, on the simplest level, a strength failure, but on a more complex level, an eccentric strength failure, or if we want to look at that, a stability decelerative failure. But in any case, the system gets overwhelmed.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up the growth spurt because that's the most optimal time to get a female athlete into a gym setting. But still I see parents hesitant. They're like, "Oh, is it too young to get into a gym setting or should we wait a little bit longer?" And I'm just like, "Well, if you think she's going through growing pains, you can turn those into gains if you get into the gym during this time." So is it good to start in middle school to get into that gym setting, like 11, 12, 13?
I'm a big fan. I think 11, that's where we start kids. I would like to see kids starting at 11. And particularly, as I said, when you're dealing with what we would have to look at it as an at-risk population, right? We've got an at-risk population of young females, particularly if they're playing lacrosse, they're playing soccer, or they're playing basketball. Those are kind of the big three from an ACL tear standpoint. I'd be getting that kid involved in a strength training program as soon as I could at 11 years old and say, okay, because the other thing we talk about all the time is that year one is always year one. So whether year one is at 18 or at 11, I'm going to end up teaching you the exact same things at 18 that I would be teaching you at 11. I'm going to start, like, as you said, I'm going to maybe teach you how to do a split squat. I'm going to try to teach you how to do a one leg squat. There are these things. I'm going to try to teach you how to do, say, a hurdle, hop, and stick. What I think I have a huge advantage teaching that at 11 versus teaching that at 18. So why not get started? Because the good thing with the female athlete is you don't get people worried about stunted growth, which is a good thing. Whereas with the males, we still have people coming to us and saying, "Well, I don't want him to lift weights because it's going to stunt his growth." Which again, total. I mean, there's no scientific basis for that ever, and people have really tried to dig in and figure out where did that come from. I don't know where it. Well, I do know where it came from, but it came from a study on Japanese child labor. They said Japanese children that were forced to do child labor were smaller than their age-adjusted counterparts. And somehow that,
I've never heard of that.
right, it's actually the New York Times article where they talk about it, but that was somehow extrapolated to strength training. That somehow, and the reality is, if you are having to do labor in Japan as a child, you're probably you've probably got a poverty problem, which means you've probably got a nutrition problem. There's probably a whole bunch of layers there. Even if you wanted to believe that particular topic, you would have to look and say, hey, there's a lot of confounding factors here that don't come into play. But you don't get that as much. I've never had I don't think I've ever had a female parent come to me and say, I'm worried that this is going to stunt her growth. But we do get that a lot with the young males. What I've tried to do, I think the bigger thing with females is, oh, I don't want my kid to end up looking like a bodybuilder. And people will show you pictures of some CrossFit competitor or something like that. And they go, I don't want her to end up like that. And I look and think, there's absolutely no chance that she ends up looking like that. So
Right.
one of the things that we've started to do, I've started to get some videos of our some of our better female athletes talking about their weight and about. So I don't have we don't have a ton of soccer. We have a lot more lacrosse women and hockey women, but we have two of the best attackers in the world that train with us, both on the national team, and they've been with us. I think post college, one of them maybe 4 years and one of them 5 years post college. They're still playing at a really high level on the national team. Neither one of them has gained any weight at all. And one of them is Charlotte North, who's sort of she's the it girl of women's lacrosse now. If you follow women's lacrosse, everybody knows who Charlotte North is. But I asked her, and she's funny because she's got a great personality. She's giggling during the video, and she's like, "I haven't gained any. I haven't gained a pound in 4 years." And you look at it and think this kid's been strength training aggressively for 4 years and isn't a pound heavier. I think so. I guess my point is that the muscle size thing is really unfounded, but that's one of the big concerns I think for the parent of the young female athlete, that suddenly somehow you or I are going to turn their kid into this freakish bodybuilder that is suddenly incredibly unattractive because they've lifted weights, and that's still something that we fight against.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy that that's still a thing. I think it has gotten a little bit better. And I think it's great that you have your older girls and your high level girls like really speaking to this, like how it's helped their performance and their bodies pretty much the same, just really athletic and powerful. So I think that's a great example. Now with like the younger middle school girls, like they come in on week one, what are some of the foundational things you're teaching them? Because I think a lot of parents, they're like, okay, yes, we want them to strength train, but we see a bunch of different training videos online and what is correct or appropriate for this age group.
So for us, we really teach the basics, particularly with that 11-year-old. We're going to teach them how to squat. And again, I'm not a huge bilateral squat person, but I still want a kid that can do a goblet squat, right? We're going to teach them to deadlift. I want them to be able to do a kettlebell deadlift. I want them to be able to do a split squat. I want them to be able to do a one leg straight leg deadlift. We're going to start with the fundamental building blocks of a good quality strength program. But we're also going to teach them how to warm up. We're going to teach them how to jump and land. We're going to teach them how to hop and land. We're going to teach them how to bound and land. And I don't know if you've been watching the latest Strength Coach podcast Ken Vick was on, and he talked about shocks versus springs, which I think is a really interesting. So our progression, as I've started to analyze it in my head, is shocks before springs.
Mhm.
So we're going to develop shocks. We're going to develop that ability to land and to decelerate. And then eventually we're going to worry about the springs. I think the springs are ultimately more important, but if I try to develop them, if I go right to what I would call real plyos, reactive kind of jumps and hops and bounds, I'm probably going to get some kids hurt. If I start with this, uh, like what we would call a stick phase, which is really, I think, that shock development phase. And we've started to get away from the idea of shock absorber, because what we've realized as we study physics more is that you're really not absorbing force, you're simply managing it. So, what we're trying to do with everybody, not just the young girls, with every athlete that we're dealing with, is get them to develop that ability to manage these forces. Because again, if we think about what is the ACL tear, the ACL tear is basically someone who can't manage the speed that they've created. They get moving too fast. There's too much momentum going forward. They can't effectively break, and when you can't break, well, then you get the femur moving on the fixed tibia, and that's what basically clips that ACL off. And you've got to get people that have that braking mechanism. You need the strength to have the braking mechanism, but you also need the eccentric strength, that ability to stick the landing so that you know that we've turned that strength that we've developed through split squat or one leg squat or whatever it is into a usable strength that's going to help us to decelerate.
Now, I want to ask about in-season training because a lot of parents listening are like, well, like, yeah, we have a 12-year-old girl, but we practice 3 or 4 days a week with our club team, and then we have 1 to 2 games on the weekend. How do we fit this in? Is it too much? What do you say to those parents?
I've taken to saying now 2 times 52, 2 times a week, 52 weeks a year for the rest of their life. And I just did a talk for a bunch of young female hockey players, and that was exactly what I told them. I said, you should be strength training 2 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year until you decide that you're not playing hockey at a serious level anymore. I would say the same thing to the parents of a young soccer player. 2 times a week, 52 weeks a year until you decide that this is no longer important. Because the way this idea of stacking workouts is really what it's all about. If you can get a kid to be consistent, then you have a really good chance to change lots of things. You're going to change probably your injury rate. You're never going to, because I think we also get into this sort of prevention versus reduction. You're not going to prevent every ACL tear. People are going to tear their ACL. My son, I always say, my son tore his ACL his junior year, and I would tell you that we did everything right to make sure that that didn't happen. But I couldn't control the game, right? And he tries to hurdle over somebody, and he's playing lacrosse. He literally tried to he was screwing around. He jumped over somebody. He tried to put his stick behind his back into his other hand, gets tangled up with this kid, ends up on the ground, torn ACL. It happens. But you would like to have done everything in your power to think that I've done everything from a preventative standpoint that I could do so that that didn't happen. And what happens with a lot of parents is that they end up looking back thinking, oh, I wish I had done that. I should have sent them to Erica sooner, or I should have gotten them in there. And I think you don't want that. The pain of regret. I had no regret with my son. I didn't look at it and think there's a lot more that we could have done. It just it happened. Let's just get on with it. Let's do a good job with the rehab and get back to playing. But I think a lot of parents would look at it and think, if I had it to do over again, once they've gone through that ACL process, because you think, oh, we don't have time, it's hard to find the time. Well, trust me, when they're out for a year or 9 months, you got plenty of time. And you could have found that time, that 2 hours a week that you really need, and get them in there. And then sometimes that may mean saying no to an additional skill section, a session. It may mean saying no to the club coach. I think one of the things that we don't do a good job of as parents is we don't say no enough. We allow these club coaches in most cases to kind of run the show for everybody and tell everybody what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. And one of the things I've tried to do, I went through it with my daughter because my daughter was an elite athlete at a young age. And we said no a lot. And people would look at us and think, you're not going to play in that tournament. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. Nope, we're not going to do that. We don't, I feel no need to go by the rules that some entrepreneur is setting for me based on their financial interest, which is usually what it is. And what they usually do is they start getting in your ear about things like, oh, if you don't do this, your kid's going to fall behind. That's the one. That's the big sell, right? The biggest sell is your kid is going to fall behind. Then you get that, oh my God, I'm a bad parent. I'm not giving my kid this opportunity. And I don't think there's enough people in any of the club settings. It's not club soccer. It's AAU basketball. Um, it's baseball. It's ice hockey. It's everything. There's way too much playing and way too little training in youth sports in general. And you just have to say, nope, we're going to skip that training and we're going to go and get our strength work done because we're thinking big picture and we're thinking long term, which is what you need to do. If you do have a kid that's talented, you probably have to do it more as opposed to less. Because the thing you realize when you say no is that if your kid is good, they're going to accept the no because they want the kid. They're very rarely going to stand their ground when you say, "Hey, we're not doing that summer tournament," or "We're going to strength training tonight versus coming to this practice," or whatever it is. Initially, they try to make you think, "Well, if you don't, you're out if you don't do this," and then they look and think, "Oh, if you're out, you're probably going to another club, and that club's going to get better because I'm being hard-headed about this particular situation." So I think parents don't realize that they have the power, they're paying the bills, and they can easily say, no, I think this is going to be a better decision in the long run for my kid. And when you do that, I think the whatever it is, the ODP, AAU code, whatever those people, they stand up and take notice because they think, wow, there's people are telling me no, and they're telling me no for good reason. And do I really want to fight with them?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And here, I don't know how it is where you live, but here in Florida, with a lot of the travel teams, I mean, there's girls like 12 or 13 years old practicing 4 days a week. And I don't think any parent has really thought to question or be like, hey, can we just do 2 or 3 times a week at this age? So it's really interesting. And it is hard, though, to speak up because parents don't want their kid to maybe get penalized or not play. But yeah, it's a hard decision.
It is, and that's why I think it sometimes it's up to the parents of the better kids because the better kids have more opportunity to do that. I think if you're in that kind of middle band or lower band, you can't afford to say no. But the higher level kid can afford to say no and generally won't. That's just the way the youth sports system works. They won't be punished. I used to do it. My daughter all the time, people would be like, "Well, can she play in this summer tournament? Can she do this?" I'm like, "No." And I would get the same, well, she's going to be, come September, she's going to be behind. And I would look at them and think, I don't think so. I think come September, she'll still be the best player. And come September, she'd come back and she'd still be the best player. And it's just, but the entrepreneurs really prey on well-meaning parents, which I think is a kind of a fundamental problem in youth sports because they get you thinking like, hey, if you're a really good parent, you'll spend as much money as you can possibly afford on your kid, and you'll do whatever we say because you really want your kid to be good, and we really want your kid to be good. And a lot of times, I don't think that's as well intentioned as it starts out to be. I think it's very self-serving in a lot of these youth programs because, I mean, and soccer does it. They talk about the idea that they don't want kids to specialize, and then they force kids to specialize. They legitimately talk out of both sides of their mouth because they make it impossible for a kid if you get in that kind of ODP um, pipeline.
ECNL.
Right. Yeah. If you're in that pipeline, there's some guy probably doing a presentation at the US Soccer Convention talking about how important it is to be a multi-sport athlete. And then when you're back home, they're making sure that you can't be a multi-sport athlete. And they're telling you that you'll be punished or penalized if you don't become a year-round soccer player. And that's, again, not unique to soccer. I won't say that it's just soccer, but soccer is one of the culprits. And and it's all about, oh, well, we want to be competitive at the national level. And I look at it and I know because I was lucky enough. I've coached the best. So I coached Mia Hamm, I coached Kristine Lilly, I coached Julie Foudy, I coached like all of the greats of the early going, and they were all really good multi-sport athletes. Kristine Lilly was captain of 3 sports in high school and then went to North Carolina and had obviously an amazing career and then had an amazing career with the national team. Mia is the most interesting because Mia actually played football
Mhm.
in Texas. I mean, football pads. There's pictures of Mia Hamm in full pads, and I read that. I went back and I read the story so that I could make sure that it was accurate. And the boy, she was the fastest runner, and her friends, the boys that she played with growing up, convinced her to go out for football in 6th or 7th grade or something like that because they said you're the fastest runner, like you'll be the best running back, you'll be the best wide receiver. And she was in Texas, Army brat, I think, or Air Force brat or something like that, and she suited up for I guess what was Pop Warner football then. I don't really know what the youth football situation was in Texas at that time. But we look at these things now and we think people would tell you you can't do that. If you want to be Mia Hamm, don't do what Mia Hamm did. You want to be Kristine Lilly, don't do what Kristine Lilly did. And I look and think, shouldn't we be looking at them and saying, hey, if you want to be Mia Hamm or you want to be Kristine Lilly, you should probably do what they did. which is grow up in a really diverse athletic background and then be a late specializer because these are the best players that we've ever had in our country. It's the same with Charlotte North. I was saying the lacrosse girl that trains with us, she wanted to play basketball at Duke. That was her goal as a kid. She didn't pick up a lacrosse stick till seventh grade. By her junior year of college, she was National Player of the Year back-to-back years, and now is the arguably the best player in the world. And the best player in the world started again. If it was Massachusetts, I always say I have a slide of her, and I say in Massachusetts we would have cut her because someone would have said, "Oh, seventh grade, too. She has no stick skills. It's too late for her."
Mm.
Right? And you think not only was it not too late, she's the best player in the world. And yet somebody would look at that and think, "Oh, she didn't pick up the stick soon enough, so it was too late." So there's just all of this mythology that's built around this that we get told as parents that just flat out isn't true.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that example of Charlotte. And there's all those donor sports where there's that transfer to, I guess, your main sport. And I guess from basketball, she learned how to keep her head on a swivel, how to play in a really tight space and just like better agility and faster decision making. So it's just, and I played lacrosse too, and I would say it helped with my soccer. And, there are all these physical benefits, Mike, like just getting better at your main sport, having less overuse injuries, and working multiple muscle groups. But looking back when I was trying other sports, it was also just the social component for me to get into new environments. And I can't imagine growing up and just doing one sport. It's just mind-boggling to me that there's kids going through the system now doing one sport and not getting into these new environments and trying new things. It makes me sad.
But also, you don't realize it may not have been you. I was just had a conversation this morning with one of our former athletes who's now working for an AI company, and my son is playing college lacrosse. But he at I don't know 10, 11, he hadn't even picked up lacrosse yet. He was playing baseball and he liked baseball. He was having fun with baseball. But if you don't sample with lacrosse, the first time I saw him play lacrosse, I remember coming home and his mom thinks I'm nuts anyway, but coming home and I'm like, he gets lacrosse. And she was kind of like, like eye rolling me as she does. And I was like, no, no, I said he's better at this than a lot of the kids that have been doing it longer. He understands from hockey, like he knows the idea of who's open and he knows the idea of when you're supposed to pass and when you're supposed to shoot. He gets it. And and I think she again was thinking like, oh yeah, because I was that way with my daughter. I remember watching my daughter and thinking she's going to be really good, and she was like, oh, you're another freaking crazy sports dad. And I was like, no, she gets like that. Like with her, I watched it with hockey, and it was like, okay, she understands this game. She's because she grew up watching it, but you don't know if you don't sample, you don't necessarily know. Like you may sample, it's kind of like food, right? If your parents only feed you certain things, then you don't know whether or not you like other things. And it's the same thing in sports. If you don't give that kid a really broad sample when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, you may pick the sport that you like best for your kid, which I think is what happens a lot. And then you may realize that, wow, my kid, like I said, Charlotte's the perfect example. She was thinking basketball, 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 basketball. And then one of her friends said, you're a good athlete. You should come out for lacrosse, play lacrosse. We need more players. And she thought, okay, I need something to do in the spring. Basketball's over. You're a middle school kid. I'll play lacrosse with these girls. But the aptitude was pretty immediate, where people thought, wow, she's already better than kids who've been doing this longer. But if you didn't sample, you wouldn't know. And I think
Mhm.
that's where the sampling is even more important at those stages in terms of trying to figure out. And even maybe it's just what does the kid like? Not even what are they better at, but hey, I really enjoy this game more than this game for whatever reason.
Yeah. And maybe they want to take it all the way to college, but you'll never know if they could have been a D1 softball player if you just forced soccer on them since
Right.
age 8. So it's kind of funny because it's like you guys could be raising like really high level athletes in a different sport if you hadn't just pushed one sport down their throats.
Right. And I think and kids and people always, I have parents all the time say, well, this is the only sport that they like. And I think, do they really know that? or is that again, have you projected that idea on them because that's the sport that you like? And what's your kid going to do? I know exactly what your kid's going to do. Your kid is going to like what you like. Your kid is going to want to make you happy. If you're walking around every day with your Barcelona Messi jersey on, every day and talking about soccer, your kids are naturally going to gravitate towards soccer. I was lucky in terms of my kids gravitated towards hockey because I was in the hockey world, but I was not a hockey person, but my kids gravitated towards what they were exposed to, and which I think is natural. And that's why I think if you expose them to a broad range of sports at a younger age, and we're probably a little off topic at this point, but you may find that you end up with a kid who really finds something that they love. And I'd say that that's the case with my son with lacrosse. I mean, I would not, if you'd said to me when he was little, what's he going to play in college? I don't think I would have guessed lacrosse.
So I do want to bring it back to ACLs and female athletes. Do you think that the early specialization is playing into the increase in ACL injuries?
Absolutely. I think there is no question in terms of just because you don't get, I think footwear change and surface change matter. So I think when you go from your cleats to your basketball shoes, from your turf or grass to wood, I think all those things are probably going to be good for athletes in terms of developing a broader ranges of ability to deal with even different surfaces, different decelerative type patterns. So I think yes, I think there is something to that. I don't know with ACLs. I think some of it, as you said early on, some of it is just a load thing in terms of we're just doing too much of one thing too often. And in that situation, I think we always, again, as strength and conditioning coaches, we know that any exposure or overexposure to a certain type of load is going to lead us to some, generally, it leads to overuse injuries. I think because of these kind of direction change sports like soccer, lacrosse, basketball, particularly, I think that the overloading of those games leads you to the ACL because you're just overloading those muscles that are responsible for controlling direction change. So I wonder sometimes if would you see less ACL tears if a kid was switching from, played basketball, soccer, lacrosse? Maybe not, because in all of those sports, there would be that exposure to those high volume and high load direction changes. I look at it and think now if you went to ice hockey has a very low ACL incidence because you stop sideways on skates. You don't decelerate the way that you would in a lot of these kind of classic invasion sports that we're talking about right now. So um, I think the answer is probably a little bit of yes and no, depending on what the other sports were.
Got it. Now, I want to talk more about the in-season training. So we've talked about the importance of strength, but I know you're also a fan of in-season speed and you're also a big feed the cats guy. So maybe just talk about the importance for these girls to continue to speed train for speed and injury resiliency.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is when you think about developing the brakes, obviously, the faster you get the vehicle going, the more demand there's going to be on the brakes. So when you're doing that speed training, one, you're developing the quantity that is the literal game changer, right? You know that you played the most dominant people, particularly in sports like soccer, are the fastest people. It is very rare that you look at somebody who can score goals who's slow and you think, wow, that person's really slow, but they scored a lot. It's like just pretty rare, right? So um, I think that in-season speed training is a really huge deal. And I think in-season speed training is a huge deal, even if it had nothing to do with injury reduction, because it's easily or more easily improved than we thought. For a long time, we kind of had that idea that speed was pretty much genetic. Either you were fast or you were slow. And what we realize now is that it's a quantity that's movable. I'm not going to make somebody slow fast, but I am going to make somebody slow faster. And I'm going to make somebody fast faster if we are doing correctly dosed speed training. But what we get, and we always talk about because of the way we're doing our speed training, we're automatically introducing more deceleration. Because as we introduce more acceleration, we have to introduce more deceleration. It's just right. It's like if you're getting the car up to 60, it has to slow down from 60. If the car only goes to 50, then it never experiences that deceleration from 60 because it never gets there. So I think there's I guess maybe an unseen decelerative benefit to this speed development stuff, and it's magnified when you have to do it inside. Because one of the things that we see is that our deceleration zone is the same length because of how we're running and how we're sprinting. But as we go faster, we have to manage that deceleration zone better. So we get kind of an invisible deceleration benefit. It's something that we weren't thinking about because people always say, "You guys do deceleration work," and I said, consciously, no, but it is very baked into what we're doing from a speed development standpoint. Because if you watched, we have about a 10-yard zone for you to slow down before you hit the wall, and the wall is padded. But in that 10 yards, you have to manage whatever speed you pick up prior to that. So as we kind of build out the flying distance and people get moving at faster rates, they're obviously experiencing greater deceleration. So there's this built-in decel effect that you're not even thinking about, but it's there.
Yeah. Now, for the parents listening whose female athlete wants to play in college, why is it so important to do all this training pre-college? I've seen some of your reels of your college athletes and then your high school athletes. Why must they get ready for this level?
Well, one, because it's going to be incredibly physically competitive. You're going to be going up when you're trying to play in college, you're being selected out of a really selective group of athletes. And you want to do as much as you can during that, whatever, 11 to 17 period to move to the physical top of that pile. And that's what you can do in strength and conditioning. If I can get you, I always think there's going to become a certain point in time, whether it's soccer, basketball, lacrosse, whatever, where I'm going to have difficulty improving your skill level. But during that same time period, I can make some really big changes in your physical ability. I can make you bigger. I can make you stronger. I always go back to, Abby Wambach trained with us too. And I had, like I said, I got to work with the 2004 Olympic team. And Abby at that time was young, but she was so physically dominant because she was so much bigger than everybody else and so much stronger than everybody else and so much more physical than everybody else. And you kind of look at that and think part of that was just Abby, like that's just who she was. But when you're looking at your young player, you think, hey, I want to get the most out of them physically that I can so that they can Abby was one of those people really, really dangerous in the box, right? Really dangerous. When two people are competing for a ball, she got the ball the vast percentage of the time, and the ball ended up in the net. She became, again, physically, she was really physically dominant in a way that not many people were at that time. She was the literal horse of a different color in terms of there weren't big, strong people up front like she was. But that's controllable, right? You can make your daughter bigger and stronger, or at least stronger, maybe not bigger, but stronger matters. And so when you start layering on the injury prevention or reduction benefit of that, and then the ability to kind of battle in tight areas, and even think about, I always thought, people think vertical jump. Why does vertical jump matter? But vertical jump really matters because if you can get your head on a ball, that's where, and I always say you learn to speak the language of the game. I learned to speak soccer because I can remember talking to soccer coaches and saying, hey, a huge percentage of the goals are scored on set pieces and they're scored on headers, and the person that jumps the highest gets their head on the ball on a set piece. And when you look at and the coaches would look at me and think, oh my God, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. And I really didn't, but I knew enough to be more than dangerous in terms of I knew that statistic was true. No one was going to be able to argue with me about the number of goals that were scored on set pieces. And you look at that and think, what dominates a set piece? One, somebody with enough leg power to get the ball into the box, and then somebody with enough physicality and jumping ability to get their head on the ball, right? And I mean, that's literally strength and conditioning. That's one of those things where you look and think these are areas where we can absolutely positively impact the game in really critical situations because you look at that and think you get a corner and you're thinking, okay, we've got a chance to score right now if we can control this ball. And again, the people that are physical and the people that can jump and the people that are strong, those are the people that are excelling in those situations.
Yeah, the stronger always gets girls better for the game, and even just the way the game has evolved, especially at the Division 1 level, just watching some of these girls, they look different than they did 10 years ago. They have a lot of muscle on them, and it's just a more physical and fast-paced game. And like I'm good friends with some of the strength staff at UNC, and the stuff they have these girls doing in the gym is amazing, and the weighted pull-ups, and they're just strong.
Yeah, we have one of our girls is down there playing now,
Who
Caitlin
is
Mara.
it?
Caitlin Mara, she's
Okay, yeah.
uh, from Boston area. But yeah, I mean, when you watch any of the videos of these of the good collegiate strength programs,
Yeah.
you see what you would expect to see, right? You see people training hard, really good at the basic lifts, and people that are exhibiting a really high level of strength. You don't see somebody like you said. You're not looking and thinking, "Oh, she can't do a chin up," right? You're looking at people and thinking, "No, these are the best female athletes in the world." And the good thing is now, and you know because you went through it, the best female athletes in the world are being treated like the best female athletes in the world now, and that was not always the case. I used to feel like we had a really big advantage with our female athletes because we were doing such a great job with them from a strength and conditioning perspective. But a lot of that advantage has been whatever mitigated because everybody's doing it. It's not unusual anymore. There's nothing unique about somebody being on a really good strength and conditioning program. It's way more, and that's what's good at the highest level. It's much more the rule than the exception, I would say.
So, what is some final piece of advice you would give parents of female athletes listening?
If you're listening to this tomorrow, find a place to train. Tomorrow,
Yes.
like the day after you listen to this, or maybe if you listen to it early enough in the day, find a place that day. To find a place, go and watch the place. Because I think people always say, well, how do I know it's a good place? I think go in and watch. If you go in and watch and it's cringy where you're like, ooh, she might ooh, I don't like the way that looks, you're in the wrong place, right? You want to walk in and look and think, hey, this place is well run. I'm looking at these kids, their technique is really good. I'm looking at the coach. The coach is interacting with them, is coaching them. I don't think it's very hard to find a good strength and conditioning place anymore if you simply are observant and you say, hey, I'd love to just come in and observe a workout. I'd love to see what the girls are doing. And if you get in there and you see it and you look and think, hey, this looks smart, it looks safe, it looks like a place that I'd want my daughter to go, then you're probably in a good spot. If you walk in and you think, hey, this place is kind of cringy, there's a bunch of, guys in tank tops running around. And I mean, I go even like listen to the music, right? It makes difference if you walk in there and the music is filled with obscenity and things. You're like, okay, that's not where I want my kid to be. You can learn a lot by just going out and making a couple site visits, calling a few friends and saying, hey, and what you want to ask about, we always talk about this. I want a place that's safe and I want a place that's smart.
Mm.
I want a place where my kid's not going to get hurt and where the training is going to be good. And people instead they look and think, oh, I want a place where they're going to get sweaty and they're going to come out. People say, I want them to come out with their tongue on the dragging on the ground. And I'm like, that's not what you want at all. You want to go into a place and think this is a place that I would like my child to go repeatedly for the next series of years. And I think when I look at our place, that's what you see. Like you come into Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, and you're going to think, whether it's a young female or a young male, you're going to look and think, this is where I want to send my kid because it is smart, it is safe, the coaches are engaged, the training is intelligent. It's not Navy SEAL shit. They're not flipping tires, you know what I mean? They're not,
Or
doing burpees.
CrossFit.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like that's I mean, like you should be able to go and look and see it. So that would be my advice. Go start, find a place tomorrow, make some site visits, go out, look, ask maybe in your local neighborhood if you have parents whose kids have been successful, are now whatever playing at the college level, ask around, say, okay, where do your kids go? Where do they train? Where's the best place to go? And find that place.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. I'll leave your ex. I'm so tempted to call it Twitter still. I don't know
I
why,
still
but
do, so that's fine.
yeah, I'll leave Mike's ex in the caption below. Please check him out. He has some great, not, do I call it tweets now? I don't know, but some great tweets and just super like honest about training and how to get stronger for female athletes. And we hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see everyone next time.